On January 27th, two people died, Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Within hours, a Democratic senator who has defended parts of Trump's border policy called for the firing of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, saying she's betraying DHS's core mission. Most people saw another political fight and moved on. But here's what you need to understand. When a sitting senator from either party publicly demands a cabinet secretary's removal, it's not about politics anymore. It's because something inside the system has broken, and the people who run that system can't fix it with her in charge. 2 deaths, 1 cabinet secretary, and a department that's starting to operate around its own leadership. Stay with me. What's actually happening here isn't on the news, but it's going to show up in your life faster than you think. This looks like standard Washington drama. Tragedy happens. Opposition party attacks. Cable news covers it for 48 hours. Everyone forgets. Except this time, it's not opposition. John Fetterman isn't some partisan resistance figure. He's been one of the few Democrats willing to break with his party on border enforcement. He's taken heat from his own side for it. When someone like that says a cabinet secretary is betraying the mission, he's not playing politics. He's reading signals from inside the building. And here's the part that matters. DHS isn't like the Department of Education or the State Department, where policy takes years to show effects. DHS is operational. Border checkpoints, detention facilities, immigration courts, disaster response, the Secret Service, the Coast Guard. When leadership breaks down at DHS, the effects are immediate. Processing stops. Coordination fails. Real-world harm follows. What you're watching isn't a political scandal. It's a system rejecting its own leadership because the mission can't survive the chaos. Let me show you what DHS actually controls, because most people have no idea. Border and Immigration Operations. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, runs 328 ports of entry. Every single day, over 1 million people cross those checkpoints. That's not a policy debate. That's logistics, staffing, coordination, legal processing. ICE manages around 40,000 detention beds, not as a talking point, as an actual operational system. People being transported, facilities being run, medical care being provided, legal access being coordinated. USCIS processes 8 to 9 million visa applications, green card petitions, and citizenship cases every year. That's tech workers, doctors, students, family reunifications that have been in motion for years. When leadership at the top becomes unreliable, these systems don't stop. They just stop working well. Agents wait for guidance that doesn't come. Policies get announced without implementation instructions. Coordination with local authorities breaks down. And that's when mistakes happen. That's when irreversible consequences occur. The agencies you don't think about. The Secret Service reports to DHS. So does the Federal Protective Service, which guards every federal building in the country. So does the U.S. Coast Guard, a full military branch during wartime. These agencies don't have time for leadership drama. The Secret Service coordinates protection details every single day. The Coast Guard runs search and rescue operations, drug interdiction, port security. FEMA deploys to disasters on hours' notice. When the person at the top of that chain becomes a source of confusion instead of direction, these agencies start working around the problem. They route decisions to deputies. They stop waiting for approval. They protect the mission by ignoring the leadership. That's not bureaucracy being difficult. That's the system trying to survive. Here's the cascade. Career officials stop elevating decisions to the secretary's office. They just start making calls themselves. State governors stop coordinating with DHS leadership. They call agency heads directly. Allied countries, Canada, Mexico, European security services, start requesting meetings with deputies instead of the secretary because they've learned the secretary can't deliver consistent answers. Congress starts getting phone calls from field agents, from state partners, from enforcement personnel, saying we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. And that's when a senator like Fetterman goes public. Not because he's trying to score points, because the operational breakdown has become impossible to ignore. Let me walk you through what happens next, because this doesn't stay contained inside DHS. Phase 1. Internal workarounds. The system starts protecting itself. Deputies take over. Agency heads stop waiting for the secretary's input. Decisions get made without her. This isn't a coup. It's survival. The mission is too important to wait for leadership that can't lead. Phase 2. External hedging. State and local partners start planning around federal unreliability. Governors announce independent border measures. Police chiefs stop coordinating with ICE. Emergency managers build their own supply chains because they can't count on FEMA showing up with coherent direction. International partners do the same. Canada adjusts its border posture. Mexico reduces intelligence sharing. European allies quietly recalibrate how much they depend on U.S. coordination. They don't announce this. They just do it. Phase 3. The breakdown becomes visible. 2 people are dead. Pretty and good. The details matter. What happened? Who failed? What decisions led to those fatal outcomes? But the structural reality is this. When DHS is operating without clear leadership, people on the ground, agents, detainees, asylum seekers, are making high-stakes decisions without guidance. In high-consequence environments, that produces casualties. And that's when it becomes a political crisis. Not because politicians care more than before, but because the dysfunction is now undeniable. This isn't just a Washington problem. This is a signal the rest of the world is reading. Allied confidence erode. Canada and Mexico coordinate with DHS every single day, on border security, on trade, on intelligence. When they can't trust that coordination, they start building alternatives. They reduce dependency. They hedge. Europe does the same. Terrorist watch lists. Passenger screening. Financial crime enforcement. When DHS becomes unreliable, allies rout around us. They don't hold press conferences about it. They just quietly stop depending on American systems. Adversaries take note. China and Russia don't need to attack when they can just watch us break ourselves. Every time a U.S. cabinet agency operates without coherent leadership, Beijing and Moscow adjust their risk calculations. They probe a little harder. They test a little more. Because they know the U.S. response will be fragmented, delayed, or non-existent. Economic consequences. Companies that depend on DHS for visa processing, tech firms, hospitals, farms, start making different decisions. They don't announce it. They just quietly shift hiring to Canada. They open offices in Europe. They build operations that don't depend on U.S. labor markets. Over time, that drains talent and investment from the American economy. Not because of policy, because of dysfunction. Here's the contradiction that should bother you. Trump campaigned on border security. It was a centerpiece of his platform. DHS is the agency responsible for delivering that. But enforcement doesn't come from speeches. It comes from operational competence, from coordination, resource management, and the ability to run a massive bureaucracy with competing mandates. The people calling for Noem's removal, including Fetterman, who supports stronger enforcement, aren't doing it because DHS is too aggressive. They're doing it because the agency can't execute its mission. Not because of policy disagreements. Because of chaos. An administration that prioritizes enforcement has installed leadership that cannot effectively enforce. The system knows it. The field agents know it. The state partners know it. And eventually, reality forces everyone else to acknowledge it. If you want to know whether this gets fixed or gets worse, here's what to track. Processing times. USCIS publishes processing data. If backlogs suddenly spike or fluctuate wildly, that's internal dysfunction becoming visible. State announcements. Watch border state governors. If Texas, Arizona, or California start announcing unilateral measures or criticizing federal coordination, it means they've given up on federal partnership. Resignations. Track deputy-level departures. If assistant secretaries or agency heads start leaving, that's not coincidence. That's the system rejecting the leadership. Allied policy shifts. Pay attention to Canada and Mexico. If they announce new screening protocols or reduced coordination, they're hedging against U.S. unreliability. Congressional oversight. If you see closed-door briefings or inspector general investigations ramping up, it means the breakdown is worse than what's public. This doesn't stabilize on its own. Either leadership changes, or the mission degrades, or the agency fractures into semi-autonomous units that ignore the secretary entirely. Systems this large, with mandates this critical, don't just collapse. They impose costs until something breaks. 2 people are already gone. That toll will grow, not because anyone wants it to, but because operational dysfunction in high-stakes environments produces casualties. The calls for Noem's removal aren't the story. They're the signal that the story has already been unfolding for months. Here's my question. Do you think this is fixable with better management, or are we watching something that only ends with a resignation? Let me know what you think.